5 years from today. And in approximately 10 minutes, these voices will bring us stories from two possible futures. One that we hope to prevent, and another which we still have time, just a little bit of time, to build. Now, the panelists that we will have here will offer insights on what we can do to build a hopeful future. And here, this empty podium here will represent future generations. And it will symbolize the blank slate that we have to create our desired future, or perhaps the future we deserve, based on what choices we make from here on. And you, the audience, will close this session by assessing how ready your countries or your organizations are for these potential futures. My name is Joe Ageyo from the Nation Media Group in Kenya. Now we'll kick off this tribunal setting with a testimony, two testimonies of the first set of witnesses joining us from the year 2100. And in this scenario, the world continued on the current trajectory with some effort, but without bold innovation or change. And those two witnesses, Julius Kruse from Germany and Situ Wai from Myanmar Republic, are already on stage. Please give them a round of applause as they come. Please take the stand.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Julius Kruse. I'm 93 years old, and I'm standing in what used to be the Hamburger Chamber of Commerce. The pillars are still standing, the roof was rebuilt after the flood. But the city around me, it's not the one I grew up in.
Mingalaba, my name is Situ Wai. I'm 108 years old. I was born in Myanmar, a country that no longer exists as a nation.
I was born here in 2006. This place once stood for progress, trade, responsibility. Now it is a reminder of what we lost.
I once believed education could transform society. In the 2020s, we trained teachers using Starlink internet. We fought dictatorship with knowledge, while warlords fought with drones.
Then came 2042. The jet stream collapsed. The dikes broke. 600,000 people fled their homes. Hamburg became Atlantis.
But our collapse did not come in a single wave. It came slowly through decades of ethnic conflict, military rule, and finally the revolution. We rose, then the people fought back, but then the war came to fight on our own soil.
That same decade, Jakarta sank, Miami burned, the Sahel starved, refugees flooded Europe.
And Myanmar became a battleground. China, India, and the United States, they did not send troops, they sent algorithms, autonomous weapons, predictive surveillance, AI power war tested on the margins of humanity.
My school never reopened after the flood. We lived in a shelter for about 8 months. I remember the cold floors more than I remember the lessons.
Mine were bombed or burned or turned into refugee shelters. Children learned to run before they learned to read.
Supply chains collapsed, institutions crumbled, governments gave up control. Data replaced money, the UN fractured, law lost meaning, and still, we waited.
Southeast Asia's fractured too. The fear of invasion became policy. Nuclear programs spread across the region, from the Mekong to the Malacca Strait. It was no longer about peace, it was about deterrence.
Bavaria opened its borders. Too little, too late.
Thailand, Bangladesh, Malaysia, their refugee camps became cities. Statelets, voiceless, we called them climate migrants, but they were a survivor of everything: flood, war, silence. I remember when we used to ask, when will the war will listen? Now I ask, when do we ever stop shouting?
Last week, the power went out again.
Last month, a drone strike hit a school that used to bear my name. And we were warned.
This room once held the visions for the future. Now it holds the silence of what might have been.
What might have been if local voices were heard in global rooms, if frontline strikers shaped policy, if the South had not been sacrificed for the comfort of the North.
My name is Hughes Leonardo Kruse.
And I'm Situe. We watched the world drown in water, in war, in broken promises. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a horrible choice we would have made. But you know what? That's not the only choice there is to make. And coming up on this stage, two young people whose voices we are hearing from the year 2100, and they have an alternative future. Yasmin Marsoul from Morocco and Carol Nasreddin from Lebanon.
Hello, everyone. So I have seen the world we feared and the one we chose to build instead. It's Carol Nasreddin, and I'm from Lebanon.
Well, me too. From my side, in 2025, I was a young Moroccan political analyst observing a continent in flux. Security threats rising, and the Sahel was facing a turbulent transformation. And the global partnerships were being redefined. There were hesitation, doubt, and fatigue, but beneath it all, I saw the clarity emerging from within. The turning point wasn't a single event. It was a series of choices made by African leaders, communities, and partners. To move beyond the externally driven models, we chose to define peace, development, and cooperation on our own terms, rooted in our regional realities and shared aspirations. The Sahel nations, especially those of the Confederation of the Sahel States, reclaimed their voices not to turn inward, but to reimagine a cooperation in a way that honored their sovereignty and the will of their people. And gradually, that sovereignty wasn't only respected, it became a foundation of a new kind of partnership. We moved away from the conditional assistance and toward the co-investment, and development and security were no longer treated as a separate tracks, but as one integrated efforts designed and driven from the continent. And one of the transformative examples was the Atlantic African Initiative. What began as a vision of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, may God assist him, grew into a continental corridor linking the coastal and the Sahelian countries through energy, infrastructure, and also logistics and maritime trade. It gave the landlocked states a gateway to opportunity and gave Africa the confidence to build its own future and turned regional integration into a lived reality. And we realized, finally, that Africa's greatest strength was not its resources, but its people, its youth, its ideas, and its sovereignty. And when the world began listening, not instructing, transformation followed.
So I still remember 2025, I was standing on the rooftop of my school in Beirut, the Phoenix city. Back then, it was just an idea. A vertical forest school. Today, it powers itself entirely with solar energy harvested through transparent glass. And below, the Phoenix city has reborn from its ashes. Kids are learning climate coding in 3 languages. It's hard to believe that just 75 years ago, we were stuck in blackout cycles, queuing for water, digging through one crisis after another, from energy shortages, water insecurity, political instability, and the fear of violence, always one spark away. What changed? We stopped waiting. In the late 2020s, while governments argued and institutions hesitated, young people from across the Middle East and Africa built something new, the Climate Frontline Network. I still remember that first virtual meeting of students from Morocco, Sudan, Niger, and here in Lebanon, realizing we were living in parallel collapse, but dreaming in the same language. The ICG advisory opinion on climate change became a turning point, a spark that spread across borders. It inspired a wave of legal recognition for the right of nature and future generations. Courts has adapted, constitutions shifted. Even private sector were forced to reckon with their footprints, reshaping business models to meet new legal and ethical demands. The drought hit Beirut and Bamako at the same time. Rivers dried, fields cracked, and instead of despair, we built together. So by 2040, we launched the Sahel-Levant Clean Corridor, a bold plan where we connect Africa and the Middle East through solar farms, regenerative agriculture belts, and green mobility routes. We didn't wait for aid. We used AI to map heat-safe zones, predicting water tensions, and reforesting lands from Senegal to Syria. Early warning systems became our shield, allowing farmers to act, community to adapt, and entire cities to prepare for heat waves and floods. So Africa stopped bleeding lithium, and Lebanon stopped bleeding youth. But the biggest shift wasn't infrastructure, it was trust, and our long-term commitment to one another. So to all the leaders of 2025, listen, the youth aren't coming. We are here. You can support us or be remembered as those who stalled our future. Thank you to those who chose courage, and to those who still unsure, look around. The seeds you doubt are now our forest. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, those are our two possible futures. And in this room, at this moment, and all around the world, we hold the power to choose which one we want. Now, to get a sense of what is possible, let us now turn to the present and respected voices who carry the onerous responsibility together with us of shaping today's systems to offer their testimony. We are calling them the guardians of the present because they are, and all of us indeed are. Ladies and gentlemen, on the panel tonight, I have the Under-Secretary General for Policy in the Executive Office of the Secretary General at the UN headquarters in New York, Guy Ryder. Please clap for him as he comes up. Now, USG Ryder leads global policy coordination with a focus on the Summit of the Future and its follow-ups, and ensures strategic alignment with the Executive Office. And therefore, there couldn't be a more befitting person to give us insights into all the emerging questions of global governance, intergenerational responsibility, and all of that within the UN system. Next, I will introduce Sophie Howe, a former Future Generations Commissioner of the Government of Wales. Now, Ms. Howe was once described by the Guardian newspaper as the world's first minister of the unborn. And that is why tonight she'll be talking to us about institutional innovation with specific focus on the Wales experience, and she'll be speaking about that in a short while. The next panelist I'll introduce is Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, a distinguished diplomat, academic, and multilateral expert with over 30 years of experience in international negotiations, global governance, and sustainable development. Now, she has many firsts to her name. From 2018 to 2019, she served as President of the UN General Assembly, becoming the first woman from Latin America and the Caribbean to hold that position. In Ecuador, where she comes from, she has held several ministerial positions, and in 2008, she became her country's first woman permanent representative to the UN in New York. Currently, she holds several prominent positions on the global stage, and there's something else she knows quite a bit about, the Climate Governance Commission, and she'll be speaking to us also, hopefully, in this hour. Last but not least, Neshan Gunasekera. And if you go to the very end, now, Neshan is an international lawyer and the Chief Executive Officer and Counselor of the World Future Council. He has worked with various systems on multilateral, regional, and community level questions. And tonight we'll be hearing from him on a number of questions regarding the legal and ethical duties that we bear towards the future generations. But first we'll start with USG Ryder, not least because he's right next to me. And I think it's fair to start from this where we must, which is really, as someone who is embedded in the UN system, I wonder what you see as the most promising pathways to embedding future generations in policy within the UN system.
Well, thanks very much. And firstly, thanks for those brilliant introductions that we just listened to. I think by putting those two alternative visions of the future, one next to the other like that, you really made the point that what our future will be, the one we want to avoid, the one we want to have, depends entirely on decisions that we take today. You know, it struck me that the apocalyptic version of the future was one characterized by a failure to act. The preferred option was one of conscious action and adjusting decision-making now to the needs of future generations. And here's the good news at the United Nations. Last year, in the Pact for the Future, we adopted, when I say we, I mean 193 member states adopted a Declaration for Future Generations, the first international treaty instrument, which actually acknowledges the responsibilities of current generations, decisions makers today, to future generations. And I'll just expand that in a minute, but that's an interesting sort of change of mindset. Moderator, if you come from my age, it's not quite 75 years, but over the last 50 years, let's call it that, I never recall policymakers really focusing consciously on what the decisions that they were taking now to respond to problems now. I never really had the impression they were factoring in the impact on future generations. There was an assumption that there was a dynamic in our societies, a sort of an inevitability about progress and improvement. So if you took a good decision that solved today's problems adequately, you were almost by definition preparing the ground for future generations in a benevolent and positive way. Somehow that doesn't apply anymore. We know it's about climate, it's about many things. And so the international system, with the Pact for the Future, I think has acknowledged that now we cannot operate on automatic pilot. We have to operate on the basis of decisions factoring consciously in the needs and interests and rights of future generations. So our Declaration for Future Generations is attempting to equip the United Nations with the skills and the capacities to do just that. We're equipping the system with the tools of strategic foresight that have to underpin this determination. We are committed to supporting our member states to do the same types of thing. And at the center of the decisions in the Declaration for Future Generations is the idea, still an idea, for the appointment of a special envoy, United Nations Special Envoy for Future Generations, to provide focus and impetus for all of this work.
Thank you very much. Ms. Howe, this is really the sort of thing you're focused on. I mean, as a matter of fact, you've been associated very directly with the unborn. I wonder, from the Welsh experience, what sort of reform, maybe just one that is most transferable to other contexts, because it really is a question of learning from best practice, and you really do have one over there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think, as Guy said, the powerful contributions from our future generations really do outline two plausible futures, and which of those futures comes about will depend on the decisions that we take today. And as a mum of 4 Gen Zs, I like to listen to a bit of British hip-hop, and there's a British hip-hop artist called Loyal Kana who says, never has so much been lost by so many because of the inaction of so few. And really what we're trying to do here, both at a global level through the work that's been been happening in the UN, and critically how that is adopted domestically within member states, is try to reform our systems of governance. Because when we go to conferences like this, or when we go to the UN General Assembly, or when we go to COP and we make these commitments, we do that often with ambition, but we come back to base, we come back to our countries and our systems of governance, discount the interests of future generations. Our decision-making frameworks are not joined up. They're permeated on a falsehood of our current economic model. And that is essentially what we've tried to change in Wales. So in 2015, we passed something called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which sets out, first of all, a vision for the Wales that we want to leave behind to future generations, co-created with citizens in Wales. It establishes an independent Future Generations Commissioner. That was my role for the first 7 years, tasked with overseeing the implementation of that legislation and challenging the government to make sure that they were seeking to meet today's needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And although I think, there is, we can be pessimistic about the future, I prefer to be optimistic. And I think actually looking at some of the signs happening in different countries and some of the innovations happening in different countries since the passing of the declaration, I think there is cause for optimism. So whether that's the Kenyan Senate coming together to look to establish a Senate committee for the future, and I believe Senator Crystal is here somewhere today, whether that's the appointment of the first tribal Future Generations Commissioner in Cameroon, whether that's Oman adopting a 2040 vision and the concepts around intergenerational equity, whether that's the appointment of the first intergenerational fairness commissioner in the EU, whether that's just this month actually, Norway's citizens panel making a recommendation to their government that there should be an enactment of a future generations legislation and a future generations commissioner. There's a lot of work to do in the UN and in different countries, but I think if we look at what that UN declaration actually committed member states to, and this is my most favourite part of the entire declaration, undertaking a whole of government approach to coordination, including at national and local levels, on the assessment, development, implementation and evaluation of policies which safeguard the needs and interests of future generations. Now that says to me it is a permeating approach across everything that we do, and that is what member states of the United Nations signed up to do. The challenge now is to build on the innovations that we're starting to see, really get behind those and start to really scale those up at pace.
Thank you, Your Excellency Espinosa. I think we're drilling down to specifics here. You've done a lot of complex work in this area. I wonder what, in your assessment, would be the character of a multilateral system that is designed with future generations in mind?
Well, first of all, I cannot just not acknowledge the very, very powerful introduction we just had. And I was thinking silently, what if we had that kind of choreography in cabinet meetings, in interactions with prime ministers, heads of state and government constantly. And here I'm speaking openly as a politician. We need to be reminded of the options we have, of the choices that we have. And either this very apocalyptic scenario that we heard, which is not about inaction, it is about the wrong decisions. Doing and deciding on issues that are going to really hurt the rights of future generations. Or the other scenario that we heard from Morocco and from Lebanon, which is the desired scenario. Because at the end of the day, politics, even at the local level, at the city level, at the community level, at the national level, at the international, intergovernmental level, politics is to close the gap between the desirable and the possible. So our responsibility as leaders, young leaders, older leaders, is precisely about closing the gap between the desirable and the possible. Politics is about the art of the possible, but the possible meaning not the minimum common denominator, but on the contrary. We heard so many incredible things about what is the future if we take the right decisions. I always think about a extraterrestrial, person coming and seeing, humans are very strange because they have all the knowledge, they have the resources, they have the technology, and yet they continue to take the wrong decisions. So what is the problem? What is the problem that I see? Many problems there, I would say. First of all, the empty podium, what it means, this empty place. It means that we are not taking serious co-responsibility, being present, having a voice. And sometimes, we hear, okay, let's organize a panel, let's organize this expert group. Okay, we need a young person, to come and be in the picture, kind of very tokenistic kind of involvement. Being a woman, being from South America, believe me, I know what it's like. Okay, we need also a woman, a person from the global South, because the optics matter. Yes, of course, the optics matter, but it's more than that. It is about co-responsibility. It is about shared power. It is about co-imagining and co-creating a new system overall. And in a truly intergenerational mode, I know we're discussing future generations. I know we're discussing scenarios of 2100, but we are also discussing, how to communicate and co-create from the elders to the children. And the children also should have a voice because they have a stake. And of course, the generations that are not born yet. And why is that we need these spaces of co-creation and co-responsibility? It's because crises, and we heard a lot of that, crisis cannot be the new normal. We cannot accept that we should always be in reactive mode, governing crisis. That's our job as politicians, as decision makers. So I think the issue of prevention, the issue of anticipation, the issue of foresight, of accountability, of really, doing what we say we're going to do. Yeah. The multilateral system, one of the main problems is the implementation deficit and the accountability deficit, because we go very easy to signing on things, including the Pact of the Future, including the Declaration on Future Generations or the Digital Compact, but then we face the challenge of actually doing it. And again, when we say every speech from any politician or any decision maker starts with this phrase, we are living multiple and compounded crises. And therefore, our capacity to respond is A, B, and C, and we come with some potential solutions. And I think that we are living for the multilateral system, that was your question, a make it or break it moment. We have the opportunity to redesign the system with all brains, hands, and souls, based on hope, but hope with brain and with hands and with feet. Not empty hope, not naive hope, but conscious, responsible hope of redesigning and rebuilding. In this resigning and rebuilding, I think we really need to take seriously the fact that the United Nations should be considered our most precious global commons, our most precious creation, human creation, that of course needs retooling, needs redesigning, needs revitalization, but I think that we need to preserve that institutional global commons that we have created. And basically not looking at the United Nations as a fragmented space, but as an ecosystem, you know, an interconnected ecosystem that is, you know, based on the decision-making power of member states, but on societies, on younger generations, on the private sector. Some call it the network multilateralism. Others say multi-stakeholder multilateralism. I call it the United Nations 2.0, Guy, and you have come up with that. So once again, when we look at the alternatives we have, and we think about the collective power we have, I think that in this room, we all choose the scenario of hope. We all choose the scenario of possibility. We all choose the scenario of transformation. We all choose the co-responsibility that we have with the empty place at the beginning of this podium. So that would be from my side.
Thank you very much. All right. Let's now move to Nishan. There is an American comedian who is supposed to have asked, what have future generations ever done for us? And you approach this from the legal and sort of ethical foundations and underpinnings of this. What exactly are these legal, ethical obligations that we have in this room to the future generations? Because that is really fundamental.
Thank you very much. Interesting perspective. First and foremost, thank you to Dio Chalali and the UNU team for inviting us in the World Future Council, for being here. Fascinating to collaborate on this very unique dice. Easy answer to that is we are here because we have borrowed the earth from future generations. And 2100 was depicted in one very negative sense and a very positive sense by the fantastic young leaders, and thank you for doing that. 75 years, I said, is not too far from here. But what does it mean, borrowing the world from future generations? And Guy mentioned the Declaration on Future Generations last year. It was an achievement, yes, but it does not mean that the Declaration on Future Generations was an achievement of the multilateral system in 2024. It's part of a continuity of what I would call a pacta sunt servanda with future generations. Now in Latin, that is the most important principle of international law that says that we have promises to you. So pacta sunt servanda for future generations, one item within that is the Pact for the Future and the Declaration on Future Generations. Picking up some voices that I resonate with the powerful representations of future generations next to you, Mr. Moderator, was two to three words. One, courage. Here I want to draw from the wisdom of one of the founding counselors of the World Future Council, late Judge Christopher Veeramantri, former Vice President of the International Court of Justice, who was considered the pioneer of international sustainable development law, where over a human generation ago, I'll come to this point of human generation, he set out in a famous case on Gabjikovo Nagimoro's project, which was heard by the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world. And he brought the wisdom of all religious indigenous systems to talk about our relationship with the future generations. Now, the first reflection to the young people, he said the 20th century was a century of lost opportunity because it was built on the famous 1899 Peace Hague Conference, which was brought together by the leaders, the political leaders of the time, to ensure that the 20th century will be one of peace. But he goes on to say, what did we do with the 20th century? We bungled it. Multiple wars, looking at negative and narrow economic gain, short-termism was built into that narrative. But he also said the 21st century is a century of last opportunity. Now, he was saying this in terms of the nuclear, at that time, the atomic bomb. Going back 80 years, Guy Ryder would also know this. The very first resolution of the United Nations talk about getting rid of atomic and nuclear weapons. The very first resolution of the General Assembly. And 8 years here we are, possibly at the break of a nuclear war. And this is what the young people raised. But he also said, he didn't end with a negative connotation to talking about the young people from Lebanon and Morocco. He's also said, if you base your work on principles of international law, on institutions which were created at much sacrifice of humans, such as the International Court of Justice, such as the International Tribunal of the Law of the Sea, which is 15 minutes walking distance from here, which last year discussed how to share 71% of the planet with regard to climate change and obligations under the sea. And this is what Pact sunt servanda with future generations mean. And the International Court of Justice on Law and Courage is where young people from the Pacific Island, 27 undergraduates without any qualification, without any experience in the multilateral system, was able to change the world on 29th of March last year, where they brought a resolution to the General Assembly, the highest decision-making body in the world, where every single member state of the United Nations vote to take this biggest question this century to the highest court in the world. That is courage, and that is what you represent in the empty podium. That is the pacta sunt servanda we have future generations. In addressing this, it is important to look at 2100, but it is also important building on from principles of indigenous systems, not only look forward, but also move backwards. Firmly fix your eyes on the past, learning from your past, and moving backwards into the future.
Oh, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, we don't have a lot of time left, but we want to turn this a little bit over to the floor. And we hope we can have enough time for everybody to speak. I'm hoping for a miracle here. But we want to first listen to those examples, the few that we have in the room of people who are already doing something to move the needle in terms of creating systems that would work for the future generations. And we'll start right now with Stella Vuta from the Robert Bosch Stiftung. If she's around, she could get the microphone and she would give us a 3-minute reflection on what philanthropy is doing in this space of policy and institutional innovation.
Yes, thank you, and thank you also from my side for this powerful beginning of the panel. So I'm very happy to offer a perspective from philanthropy and what philanthropy can bring to the table in building a multilateral system for future generations. My name is Stella. I represent the Robert Bosch Foundation, which is a European private foundation working on health, education, and global challenges such as peace, migration, and climate change, areas, of course, that are deeply interwoven with the health and legitimacy of the multilateral system. We believe that international cooperation is not a luxury. It is a necessity, and that is why we are deeply worried of recent development, the defunding of the UN, the attacks on the multilateral system. And yet, the current moment, in our view, is not only one of crisis, which will inevitably lead us to the second scenario, but also a moment of potential transformation. We, at the Robert Bosch Stiftung, we work closely with local actors in fragile contexts. And what we hear time and again is this. Our current global governance model too often speaks about people and not with them. So when we talk about reform, about UN 80, the Pact for the Future, and the Declaration of Future Generations, we must not only ask what needs to change, but also who gets to shape that change. As a philanthropic actor, at the moment, we are often asked, so will philanthropy now step in to fill the financial gaps left by shrinking public funding? And our answer is, well, that's not where our greatest value lies. Philanthropy's most important contribution is not to patch holes in a system that might be failing, but to support those who are imagining what a better system, a more efficient system, a more just system could look like. Those working across regions, across generations and sectors to put long-term thinking and intergenerational justice at the center of governance. And those piloting innovations that challenge the status quo and offer credible alternatives. So in our view, philanthropic actors can and should support this transition by identifying and amplifying visions, by creating protected spaces for dialogue, and by taking calculated risks that public institutions often cannot afford.
Thank you very much. We are moving over to Parliament now, and we'll start from Finland. Mikko Duffa, who leads the foresight team at Sitra, the Finnish Innovation Fund.
Thank you, and thank you. So I want to give three kind of perhaps lessons learned from what we've done in Finland. Some of these lessons have already come up, but it's good to kind of reinforce them. So I would start with it's good to build on what you have. In Finland, we have a lot of legacy in foresight, and we'll have a lot of structures and processes. Some say too much. For example, we have each government has to make a government report on the future. The previous one was on next generations. A lot of recommendations for policy. And now the question is, okay, we have recommendations how to move forward into implementation and into action. A second thing that I've learned is perhaps to kind of support what wants to emerge. So exactly 1 week ago, we organized a panel with 9th grade students, with the mayor of Helsinki, and with the president of Finland, Alexander Stubb, talking about security. And before that, we had asked the students their views on security with this digital platform called Polis, giving them the power also to create the statements, so to really have their voice heard. And that whole panel was a huge success, and now we are trying to find ways to replicate these and make them easily scalable and use elsewhere as well. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, but this is the hard part, we really need to change the narrative around decision making. So if we want to create long-term change, we need to challenge assumptions and change the narrative, change the mindsets. This was also mentioned already. So not seeing intergenerational fairness as an an add-on, but something that is, if we want to be really serious about sustainability, something that is very fundamental, that we need to not only listen to who is now here, but also who is here tomorrow, and that it also includes the more than human voices. We've been doing this in our How to Define Futures program, funding different pilots, examples, projects, and I'm really inspired about all of these examples and how they are in part writing another narrative about what it actually is to make decisions. So those would be also perhaps questions for all of us to consider. How can we build on what we have? How can we support what wants to emerge? And how can we change the narrative? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, last but not least, let's go to Senator Crystal Ageyo from the Kenyan Senate. She is the first and only senator in that country to span all three special interest groups, persons with disability, women and youth, alongside creatives. She's also a great singer, by the way. But tonight she's going to give us a sense of what they are doing as a Kenyan Senate with regard to the outcomes of the Summit of the Future. Senator Ageyo, please.
Sante, thank you so much, Joe. This time last year when we were at HSC for the first event, it was October of 2024, and I was sat in this very panel in the audience listening to Future's conversations. And I was excited because just the month prior, in September of 2024, Kenya developed and launched its Senate Futures Caucus in Nairobi. Sophie and Dawi and others were also there. So I was very excited, and I'm excited to give a report on what we've been doing in the last 8 or 9 months. As we know, parliaments worldwide share a crucial role in adopting an intergenerational fairness perspective. This ensures that futures can equally enjoy all human rights and benefits from the Earth's resources. Notably, Kenya's constitution in its preamble, in its Bill of Rights, and also in public finance chapters, explicitly mandates state organs, including us in Parliament, and all citizens in general, to safeguard both future and present generations. So the caucus was born from this particular from this mandate, and a deep concern for Kenyans' increasing debt burden, coupled with the moral obligation to protect the rights of future generations. Our chair is Senator Ledama Olekina, and he's very passionate. And this caucus is a driving force for change, embedding foresight into Kenya's legislative framework. And our initiatives are proactive. That's the best part, demonstrating a forward-thinking approach to anticipating and addressing the evolving needs of future generations. So far, let me say, however, our governance systems, we all know, are very reactive and driven by short-term thinking and a lot of politicking, sadly. But our caucus has bridged this gap, providing a platform for future-oriented dialogue, policy innovation, and collaboration, of course, which is very important. And the core objectives are as follows. There is empowering senators and staff with strategic foresight capacity, integrating foresight tools into our legislative and policy development frameworks, forging strong partnerships with CSO, of course, and development partners in the room, and international foresight institutions. And of course, we want to raise public awareness about this work, which is very important nationally and internationally. We have had a retreat last month, which we were able to put together our strategy. This is going to run for 2025 to 2028 through a dedicated foresight consultant. We did that. And this plan prioritizes awareness campaigns, it prioritizes sectoral foresight projects, intergovernmental collaborations, and the ambitious goal of establishing a future readiness index for Kenya. And we also want to turn this caucus not just into a caucus, because right now we are only 8 senators who are in the caucus, but we have been able to lobby and get now 20 senators, which is a third of the Senate, now in the caucus. We want to move from being a caucus eventually to being a standing parliamentary committee, so that no parliament, no electoral cycle, no politicking can get in the way of this committee's work in the future. And I really want to just, in closing, Joe, I want to encourage other parliaments who might be thinking about doing this work. Kenya is a pioneer, yes, in the East Africa region, but it's only because we have passionate members of parliament, including myself. I'm a young person, I'm a visually impaired person, I'm a woman, and I'm an African, and it's important to remember that development is not about buildings and streets. Development is about mindset, and it's about attitude. That's where we are going to find solutions for future generations, because right now, people are planning for us in Africa, but we need to plan for ourselves and take our future into our own hands, because the future is not somewhere in the future. The future is right now, and we have to plan for it and fund for it. And if anyone is willing to support Kenya's caucus, please talk to me. I'll be around. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are almost out of time, but I think I just have just about 1 minute for Claudette, and please don't go anywhere. Claudette Salinas Leiva from Mexico to give some final closing thoughts from the young people. Try again. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, I was meant to be here with another colleague, Mansi, who is a young leader from Nepal, who unfortunately couldn't make it because of visa issues. In spite of this systemic barrier, we wanted to draw 3 conclusions from the workshop that you had the chance of curate for us. The first recommendation is seize the moment. We don't mean to use future generations as a buzzword, but what we actually encourage you all to do is to link this the future's mindset into real-life conversations like the housing crisis, conflict, debt, etc. We know that we're in the midst of a crisis. However, we are also convinced that we need to take this window of opportunity to actually change the mindset that we have to achieve more hopeful futures, which we are able to actually obtain. We also discussed that we needed to be brave and leave behind what no longer serves us, and instead pursue from words to action. This means taking stock of all of the resources, the institutions, legislations available, unlock them and start connecting the dots, because that's where we will start seeing governments actually place fairness at the heart of what they do. Not just across sectors or across regions, but also across generations. And of course, always embracing the fact that we need to start thinking about new ways of doing government in a way that it's more prepared as opposed to reactive. And the final thing is just tapping into each other's expertise. We have had an amazing panel filled of intergenerational experiences that we can just continue doing that, because after all, long-term governance is not something that only leaders need to drive, but civil society. And beyond ideas, it's the fact that we need to remind ourselves that it's people driving the change.
Wow, thank you very much. Future generations is not a buzzword. Connecting the dots, making governments future-proof.
Before you finish, ask all the young people also to join us on the...
All right, so all the young people who've made presentations, if you can just come as I wrap up here, please. The first, yeah, come on, give them a round of applause as they come up. So we're just going to take us as... We're going to take a symbolic vote. They just gave their recommendations right here. How many people think that those are great ideas that we can take forward? By a show of hands. Just so that we can get a good picture of the symbolic vote coming out of this place. All right. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Ladies and gentlemen, the year 2100 that we talked about at the beginning is not science fiction. It is a lifetime of today's children and grandchildren. A child born this year could very well see the dawn of that new century, the 22nd century. What will they say about the decisions we made in this room, in this decade, at this inflection point? Will they find that we planned only for election cycles and budget years? Or will they see that we cast our vision beyond the horizon and chose to build a world they could inherit with dignity? May history say that we were the generation that thought beyond itself. I thank you. And a big thank you to my panelists, Nishan Gunasekera, Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, Ms. Sophie Howe, and USG Guy Ryder, and of course, the wonderful young people. One more thing. We are talking about the future, isn't it? So I've been told there's something really interesting. So stay put where you are. You will soon find out. Thank you.
And now for a musical interlude, the world premiere of All for One, an anthem dedicated to peace, climate justice, and sustainability. Please welcome to the stage Vicky and Pippa Munero from Hamburg's Youth Music School, accompanied by Lucas Echeverria.
just say